Every day, television gives us a glimpse into the polished world of celebrity interviews, late-night jokes, and scripted laughter. But every now and then, something breaks through the surface, a moment raw, real, and unforgettable. You're watching Luxury Auto 1, where the untold moments rise above the noise, and today, we take you inside one of the most unexpected live clashes of 2025. It was supposed to be a celebration. Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and director, known for his quiet strength and unapologetic opinions, was booked for a special guest appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. At 94 years old, Eastwood had just finished directing what he claimed would be his final film, a gritty, emotional piece set in the heart of post-war America, titled The Last Shot. The film had stirred early Oscar buzz and captivated critics with its haunting realism. The audience came expecting a nostalgic and respectful tribute to a man whose career had defined generations of cinema. But what they witnessed instead was an unfiltered confrontation that would end with Clint Eastwood being kicked off live television. The night began with laughter. Jimmy Kimmel welcomed Clint onto the stage with a mix of reverence and sarcasm, a signature blend that audiences had come to expect from the host. Clint, wearing his usual understated blazer and that familiar steel gaze, walked slowly to his seat, greeted warmly by applause. For the first 10 minutes, the conversation flowed. They talked about The Last Shot, the casting process, and Eastwood's decades of experience behind the camera. He spoke softly, deliberately, as if measuring every word before letting it go. And then, it shifted. Kimmel, always one to find an edge in the conversation, brought up a recent quote Clint gave during a press conference where he criticized what he called a culture too afraid to speak the truth. It wasn't the quote that sparked the fuse, it was the tone in which Kimmel approached it. "So, Clint," Kimmel said, with a half-smile, "you said the world's gotten too soft. What exactly does that mean coming from someone who's never had to adapt to the times?" The studio grew quiet. It was subtle, but something in Clint's expression changed. His jaw tensed. His hands, resting on his lap, tightened just slightly. Clint responded calmly, "It means I've seen enough to know that fear of offense has replaced courage." "That's what it means." Kimmel leaned in, amused. "Or maybe the world just moved on, and you didn't like that." The exchange lit a fuse that would burn through the next several minutes of the show. Clint, though still measured, was no longer interested in playing along. He pushed back. "There's a difference between progress and losing your backbone. We've lost our backbone." The back and forth escalated quickly. Kimmel, perhaps not realizing how far he was going, kept jabbing. "What backbone are we talking about, Clint? The kind where you could say anything, hurt anyone, and just wave it off as toughness?" "No," Clint replied, firmly. "The kind where you could disagree like men without being shut down, mocked, or cancelled." The audience was divided. Some applauded, others shifted uncomfortably. The crew, according to sources, was already scrambling behind the scenes, unsure of whether to let the conversation play out or cut to commercial. But Clint wasn't done. He leaned forward slightly, pointing at the host. "You sit behind this desk and poke at people who've lived more in a year than you've dared in a lifetime. That's not comedy, Jimmy. That's cowardice dressed up as wit. That's when it happened." Kimmel, clearly rattled, muttered, "You can leave anytime if you don't like it." Clint stood. There was no dramatic storming. No yelling. Just a slow, deliberate rise from the chair. The room was silent. "Maybe I will," he said. And then he walked off the set. The cameras panned awkwardly to Kimmel, who was left speechless. A few seconds passed before the show cut to a sudden commercial break. What followed was a media storm. Social media exploded within minutes. #EastwoodWalksOut began trending within the hour. Some praised Clint for standing his ground. Others accused him of being out of touch. But what no one could deny was this: television had just witnessed one of its most unfiltered and human moments in years. Backstage sources later confirmed that Clint was officially told by ABC producers not to return to the show. Kimmel, facing backlash from both fans and critics, issued a carefully worded response the next morning. "We had a difference of opinion," Kimmel wrote in a tweet. "I respect Mr. Eastwood's career and his legacy, but we don't always see eye to eye, and that's okay." But for Clint, it wasn't about a tweet or a reputation. It was about principle. In a rare post-interview with an independent journalist, he reflected on the moment. "I don't need late-night approval," Clint said. "I just need to be able to speak my truth. If that's too much for TV, so be it." That line became a headline of its own. Too much for TV. People began replaying the clip, watching closely. It wasn't the confrontation that captured them. It was the dignity with which Clint chose to leave it. No shouting, no insults, just conviction. And in that moment, a man in his 90s reminded a whole generation what it means to draw the line. This wasn't just another talk show fight. It was the collapse of scripted politeness when met with real-world grit. In a space where celebrities often stay on brand and avoid conflict, Eastwood showed what happens when someone brings real life into the studio. At Luxary Auto One, we don't just follow the headlines. We uncover the moments where public personas crack and the real person speaks through. This wasn't Clint Eastwood the movie star. This was Clint Eastwood the man, staring down a culture that often confuses noise for substance. Since the incident, The Last Shot has seen a surge in streaming views. Whether because of the controversy or the curiosity it sparked, people wanted to know what Clint Eastwood's final message was all about. They found it in his film, and perhaps more clearly, in his silence as he walked away from Jimmy Kimmel's stage. For many, it wasn't just a walkout. It was a statement. And in a time when most are shouting to be heard, Clint Eastwood chose to walk quietly, and said more than words ever could. As the dust settled, conversations continued. Was Jimmy Kimmel out of line? Was Clint Eastwood too rigid in his stance? Or was this just the perfect storm of two worlds clashing? One that thrives on fast talk and clever jabs, and another that values respect, honesty, and grit. You be the judge, because sometimes, the most unforgettable moments aren't scripted, rehearsed, or manufactured for applause. They're the ones that happen when someone decides enough is enough. And for Clint Eastwood, that moment came in 2025, live, unedited, and utterly unforgettable. This is Luxary Auto One. We bring you stories that speak when others stay silent. Subscribe and stay with us as we continue sharing the untold moments that define our times. Because truth doesn't need a spotlight. It only needs the courage to stand. Or in Clint Eastwood's case, the strength to walk away.